Hi, welcome to a new podcast from me and Wallace, the Messed Up Counsellor. Today's podcast is hopefully interesting to you. It's about making love or having sex, and whether making love and having sex are the same thing. We're going to look at sensate focusing work, and we're going to look at some of the things that people kind of need to have as part of their relationship when relationships have gone wrong. In my world, certainly counselling couples, but not always couples, individuals as well. Part of their life, their world, their relationship is having an intimate relationship. And that means a physical as well as an emotional relationship. So when we're looking at that aspect of relationships, then most people don't necessarily, and I'm a guy, I can say this, most guys don't necessarily understand the difference between making love and having sex. We're not necessarily brought up to understand the differences and to understand what an intimate relationship looks like. That's because sex usually is not necessarily a topic that people talk about, and so it's not really on our learning agenda. But when we kind of work with couples, there'll be a point where we may need to, not always, but we may need to look at their physical, intimate, and emotional relationship. When we're doing that, and surprisingly, whenever I've done that in the last 20 odd years, and I've had a couple, and I've said to the couple, certainly with a heterosexual couple, probably more, would you rather, to the male, would you rather have sex or make love? The males nearly always have said make love, which has always really surprised their partner. They don't necessarily see that. But for a lot of men, and certainly men of my age, I think it's changing with younger men nowadays. But certainly in men of my age, having sex was always an indicator that the other person loved me. Now I know that's different now. I'm aware, I've been educated in a sense. So I kind of like to see that making love is a much more longer, intimate process than just the physical act of having sex. They will be combined usually, but they're not just about a physical connection. They're more about an emotional connection. And stereotypically, females need an emotional connection to have a physical connection. So, in building the relationship back up, which is kind of part of the work I do with couples after things have been more detached, or arguments or situations have occurred where the couple have been distant from each other, then as I work that process, I get them to explore what their physical, emotional, intimate relationship looks like. Now, a lot of that is uncomfortable for some people, males and females, to be fair. But it is something that they need to feel able to talk to each other about. And having me bring up the topic, so to speak, and give an introduction to the topic helps them sometimes to explore it. But it's a bit awkward at first. And certainly when an outsider, a third party, is saying, can we talk about your intimate, physical, and emotional relationship? But once we get through that awkward bit, that kind of like embarrassing bit, then we can start discussing what it is that they see as a making love process and what they see as a having sex process. And both are equally valid and both are needed sometimes. Certainly for quickies, if we haven't got much time, then a physical, urgent interaction can be very rewarding, very stimulating. But when we do have that space and time, then we usually want to have a longer process. Now, we call that sensate focusing work. So, sensate focusing is about the sensual, the connection of a sensual process. So, we kind of look at it from the point of view of, in a sense, taking it back to basics. Now, when a couple's been together for a long period of time, they may have been together for a long period of time and never, ever, for years, had a physical encounter with each other. It's not uncommon for me to see couples in their 50s, 60s where, for 20, 30 years they've not had a physical relationship. So we need to explore that. We need to open up that, which I said is sometimes a bit embarrassing, a bit awkward. But if the therapist, if the counsellor, if you're here as therapists and counsellors listening to this, watching this, then within the first couple of sessions, I usually bring it into the discussion with a couple. I usually bring that conversation in. Not necessarily that we're going to work with it at that time, but I still give them an understanding that it's okay to talk about it. I give them permission to open up that dialogue. And sometimes that can be really helpful because then they'll see that I'm not going to be embarrassed by it. Nothing they see is going to upset me or make me feel uncomfortable because I brought the topic up. So if there is counsellors and therapists listening to this, looking at this, and they are couple therapists and counsellors, or even PST, psychosexual therapists, then we do need to actually give the client or clients permission to talk about it because generally speaking, they probably won't, certainly if they've not been used to talking about it, which for a vast majority of people is true. So when we're looking at Sensate focus work, as I say, we strip it back. We start looking at a process of planned engagement, not when we can get around to it, because when we have kids, that process means that we're probably not going to be as physical connected together when the kids are around, usually. And we certainly aren't going to be as liberated when the kids are around, I would imagine. You won't go kind of utilising a verbal process of enjoyment. You will probably be more quiet, more able to stifle it, so to speak, because you don't want your children thinking somebody's been murdered in the next room kind of process. So we change our dynamics when we become parents, and that sometimes can be really hard for both parties, to be fair, to find that space, time. So we tend to ask couples to find that time by diarying it. Now, I know that sounds a bit prescriptive. It sounds a bit planned. But sometimes in this busy world, if we don't plan that time, we really don't get around to it. Other things become more important. So we find space and time that they're on their own, not with anybody else around, and no kids, none of those kind of responsibilities, and where they have time to relax, to unwind, to start building that sensate focus. Now, it might seem really obvious, but for a lot of people, it cannot be. That we say to people building that time, okay, you need to prepare, you need to get yourselves available, you need to shower, you need to clean, you need to cleanse, you need to build that process of connection so that both people feel really special, comfortable in that process. So I know that might seem obvious, but it isn't obvious to a lot of people, I'm afraid. So we need to build that. We need to build that into the planning, into the construction, that we find the right environment, we find the right ambience. We might have soft music or we might have soft lighting, those kind of things. And, we don't really want to do it when we're absolutely tired out at the end of the day, when we've been at work and all the stresses. Lots of things can affect libido. Medication can affect libido. Libido is the kind of wanting to engage physically, emotionally. So the kind of attraction, the kind of power, the libido. They also, if we're stressed, that can have a major effect on the libido. Tired can have a major effect on the libido. Lots of things can change that. And so it's not always about not wanting the person I'm with. It's sometimes about the life that I'm living. So that's why we need to create this space and time. And we need to create the right environment in order to have that connection. Now, everybody's libido is different at different times in their lives. So usually with a couple, you're not going to have the same libido at the same time, usually. One will be more up for it, eager for it. The other person will probably be less than. So it's a balancing act. It's a kind of bringing people together, and that giving space and time for it to happen is helpful because people can plan, can get used to the idea, become more comfortable with it, take control of it in that sense. So when we've talked about making that time, the environment, the ambience, the lighting, the mood, all those kind of things, then we talk about how we're going to engage in that process. Now, for a lot of people, if they've not been connected for a long while, they may feel uncomfortable in that first step of connecting physically. So we use different tools in order to help that, to make people more relaxed. So you might have a process, and we give people options. We don't tell them what to do, obviously. And we only would do Sensate couple work when we know the couple is secure and they both trust each other, and the relationship's gone through whatever disturbance it was having when they came to us. Because it's important that if I'm going to allow somebody to hold, touch, caress, and enter my body, then I'm going to have to want to trust them and feel comfortable with that. So we build that process through the counselling, and then we come to usually the Sensate focus work at the end. And sometimes we don't need to, which is fine. Sometimes we do need to, which again is fine. So we build that time. We then get tools in order to help that connection. So a tool I use is I look at containers. And the containers can be anything: jar, jug, box, whatever. But we use a container to put in the things we would like to be done to us. So you might have different containers for different connections. So you might have clothed containers. You might have unclothed downstairs containers. You might have unclothed upstairs containers. You can play with the concept and you can build as many containers as you feel comfortable with. The main thing is both people are okay with what we're doing. Nobody feels pressurized or pushed or given an idea that they have to. It has to be both people coming that connection in they're in charge of it, they're in control of it, where they feel relaxed. So each person would have a container. And in the container, as I said, they would put things they would like to be done to them. And so each person then would find in some kind of timing device, maybe an egg timer, about 3 or 4 minutes. They would pick out of the other person's container and they would then make that happen for them. Now, the thing with that, the containers, is that each person needs to look through the other person's containers first before they do this. Because if you can look through it, you then have an opportunity to take out anything you feel uncomfortable doing to that person. So we're not finding things in there that we're shocked by or we're uncomfortable with. It's something that both people need to feel comfortable. So some person might want a particular thing doing, but the other person really is not into that. If that person left that item, that thing in that kind of process, then that wouldn't necessarily help both people be together, because one person would not want to do that. They would think they were told to do it, which will never be helpful. So each person can look through the other person's containers and they can take out anything that they feel uncomfortable with. So that they know whatever's left in the containers, both people, A, the person who put it in, wants it, and B, the person who's picking it out, is comfortable with it. And you might find things that would extend what you would do in your relationship previously. You might find new ideas, new ways of being, new understandings about each other. So that's a process of engaging, and then you build that. So you might say, okay, to start with, you might say, okay, then the containers are only clothed downstairs. And you might then restrict the containers to holding hands, kissing, cuddling, but not working with any of the sexual genitalia, the breasts or the vagina or the penis. So that process means that you can build touch, sensate, sensual connections. So you build touch, you build a getting used to somebody's touch and the excitement of the touch. And then you might, after a period of time when both people feel comfortable, you might move on to the next container, which might be downstairs unclothed, or it could be with lingerie or with some kind of process of different clothing to outside clothing. So you can play with the concept. And as you build that connection, as you build that process, then each person starts finding out about each other and finding out about each other's bodies. Because there's a lot of things that people don't realize about their bodies. So Sensate Focus also is an educational process. It's about people being aware of bodies. Now that might seem absolutely ridiculous, but for most people, they don't really know the other person's body. They know their body, obviously, but some people don't actually know their body because they've never really looked at it, concentrated on it. Yeah, maybe they've never ever understood what the parts of their body. So the educational process will be about using maybe photographs, slides, educational tools in order to understand bodies, understand how bodies work in a sexual process and those kind of things. So when we're doing that work and we're building up that educational process, we take time, we don't rush it. As I say, the Sensate Focus work needs to be given time, given space to build that connection. And certainly if people haven't been physical with each other for a long period of time, that is important. And we build the intimacy and we build the emotional process between the two because that will help. So when we're doing that and we're building that process, then we have boundaries. Each person has boundaries of what they feel comfortable with or not comfortable with. And they have to agree those boundaries. Now, what that does is it builds a structure that both people can feel comfortable with, but it also builds the process of trust between the couple. Because if I'm given a boundary, say I don't like my feet touched, for example, which is a common one for a lot of people, then that person can honour and respect that and not touch my feet. That will build trust between the couple. And that's going to engage better in the future with all parts of their relationship, not just their intimacy. As it's building this process, then generally speaking, it will help each person to feel safe, feel comfortable, feel respected, valued, all those good things in a relationship. And then when we're doing that work, there'll be a point, usually, where the couple will come into the room and we'll start a session. And there'll be giggles, there'll be laughs, there'll be fun. And we'll say something like, okay, so yeah, do you want me to understand what's going on? Do you want to let me into what's going on for you both? And they was, oh, we did it last night. And that obviously means they've had some kind of connected process. And we will explore that. We will explore how it was, what it was like, how they felt about it, how that kind of worked for them. And to build on that awareness, understanding, build on that openness, that frank discussion, so they're not embarrassed about talking about it, and so they can be more connected to it. And obviously, sometimes they'll say things like, well, that didn't work. So then again, we'll look at it, we'll explore it, we'll find why it didn't work and what we can do about it. And then tweak the process in order for it to be better next time. The problem with a lot of people in their physical appearance is self-confidence. They feel very uncomfortable with their body for a lot of people, and that can be anything about the body. It can be their ears, their nose, their mouth, their physical organs. It can be anything. And that will hamper them feeling comfortable. So we need to kind of think about those kind of areas, and we need to think about that process of building confidence and self-esteem. And sometimes we need to do that before we do the sensate focus work, maybe one-on-one, you know. Um, I was once working many years ago with somebody who had a very big fear of their sexual penis. And they, in their world, felt they were not as they should be. So that's a big one for a lot of people. So we did some one-on-one work. We looked at that process. We explored different types of penises and different shapes, sizes, all those kind of things, to find out that actually their fears, their worries, their concerns about the size of their penis, it was not true, and that they were absolutely normal, because there is no normal. So getting that process of education sometimes is helpful, because most people, certainly of my age and younger to be fair, we didn't get any real sexual educational process. We didn't discuss it. We might have looked at rabbits. You know, what's a rabbit, you know? So those kind of processes mean that is a big area of our world and our life that we didn't get good quality education about. We usually learnt it in around the back of the bike sheds and, you know, things that people said to us. A lot of people nowadays, young people, they build their understanding what a sexual relationship looks like from videos and pornography and those kind of things, which is usually not helpful, because it's usually fairly extreme. It doesn't have a intimacy, a warmth, a loving, a sensate or a sensual process. It's just a physical act. And for a lot of young people, they're kind of growing up with the belief that is what it is and that's what you do, male and female, to be fair. And they don't necessarily have good quality educational process around it. And that's a shame, because for most people, it is a part of a relationship, and it's a part that can really enhance a relationship. And most people's ideas of what is okay, what is not okay sexually is different. And there is nothing right or wrong. The only thing that's wrong would be if any contact was abusive, and didn't necessarily take on board the other person's needs, requirements, rules, boundaries, thoughts, ideas. If that happens, it is wrong. Both things should be talked about, explored, and explained, and each person should respect the other person's boundaries, because that will build a healthy relationship. So when we're looking at physical, sensate, focusing work with clients, we always have those kind of conversations. That if both people are not enjoying it, it's not going to be making love. It's going to be something completely different, which will not enhance the relationship, generally speaking. And so, whatever two people want to do, consenting adults, is fine, as far as I'm concerned, as long as it's not abusive and it's not illegal. If it's abusive or illegal, then pretty much we need to take a view on it, and we need to have that discussion. But for some people, they don't realise that. And that's a shame, because education is about becoming aware. If we become aware, we can change what we do, we can understand it more. But when we're not aware, we just do what we think we should do, which usually doesn't have a conversational process. It usually is just get on with it kind of process. So if you're in that relationship with your partner, and if it's got to be, you know, having sex, and it's not rewarding, it's not enjoyable, it's not feeling as though you're involved in the process, then please look at it. Please look at what you do. Find some way of awareness, education, understanding. Lots and lots of books and articles nowadays. and try and get both people to engage with the process, not in a way that says, I've got to do this, but in a way that says, right, okay, what do we do about this together? And respect and value each other in the process. And when you're working with that process, if, for example, you do overstep a boundary for whatever reason, then own it, stop it, reconnect, talk, communicate, and find out what it is that you feel comfortable with. If you can do that, then you will gradually, maybe take one step back, but gradually go forward. And as you're going forward with that, as you're experiencing that and enjoying that, both people, then that will enhance your relationship. You will find that. But finding that space and time as a couple is not easy. You should also look at, think about actually helping your teenager, young person, son or daughter, to have those open conversations. That might feel a bit uncomfortable to start with. But they, like you, are looking at relationships and looking at what they do and how they would do what they do and what is okay, what is not okay. And if they don't have good, informed understanding, then they're pretty much going to get it from the other sources, which probably is not going to be helpful. So as you're working towards that, try and give them an understanding that they can talk to you about their sexuality. They can talk to you about their process of sexual connection, as long as it's legal and not abusive, obviously. And they can share that process with you. And you might learn things from them along the way. But it's not a taboo subject. It's a normal subject. It's like any subject that's part of our world and our life. Don't see it as a thing that shouldn't be talked about. Try to open it up in a way that can be talked about, if they so wish. That'll be weird at start. It will. It is weird when I'm in the room with a couple. It's a bit awkward and a bit embarrassing. But if, when we have those conversations, we can increase that connection, we can make that bond stronger, more emotionally connected, more intimate, then that process will help build the whole relationship, and not just their relationship, but the relationships around them. Because the more the parental figures feel comfortable, connected, all those kind of things, the more the whole family feels safe and secure, and the more aware they are of what good quality relationships look like. And that would be really good for them as they grow up and have their own relationships. There's a lot of difference and diversity within gender and sexuality. And that's good. That's absolutely fine. And it should be like that. We should be able to be us, whatever us is. So don't automatically assume, if you are doing that work with your young people, that they fit your view of the world. Their view of the world will be different. The nature of the world that's changed, it will be different. But accommodate, allow, connect. Let them see them as okay, as not having to be this or that or the other. And their process of being connected, their sexuality, their gender may change over the years, which is fine. It's about feeling comfortable being me, whatever me is. And the more the parental figures can allow those conversations, the more they will feel comfortable and secure being me. So if you do have that relationship breakdown, if you do have that physical connection that's been left behind somewhere, that's been forgotten about, if you don't feel as though you can be connected intimately or emotionally, and it's just functional, the relationship, but you want it to be more, then have a conversation about it, talk about it, find somebody like me who can help you with it if you need to. But don't just grin and bear it. Make it something that you need to talk about. and openly talk about without fear or worry or concern. If this program's been helpful, stimulating in your awareness and education, then that's good. And please like and share any of the podcasts that I do on lots and lots of different topics. And you never know, you may help one of your friends or one of your family start dealing with some of the things I talk about without it being restricted or not able to be talked about. We might start a discussion, which would be really good. My name's Ian Wallace. I'm the Messed Up Counsellor. Take care.